Thank you so much for joining me for another message from the wilderness. Recently, I read an article published in 2018 in the Journal of Hate Studies, written by Dr. Kayla Keener, a faculty member at George Mason University. Her article describes some of the current immense challenges facing our government in the U.S. I've been pondering these challenges much lately, and I've wondered if our nation's founders foresaw such barriers to democracy. Dr. Keener's article is titled Alternative Facts and Fake News: Digital Mediation and the Effective Spread of Hate in the Era of Trump. In her meticulously researched article, Dr. Keener concludes, hate has become a uniquely mobilized effect and gathering point for public sentiment in the era of Trump, signaling a dangerous turn toward a politics predicated on distrust and demonization of all imagined outsiders and others. Well, it's hard to imagine otherwise when one considers the facts. Hate speech, including lies, insults, and name-calling, have become commonplace in the U.S. Many of our people, drawn to the desire to belong with others, have embraced and even celebrated this trend. Our founders did comment on this possibility, and their assessment is sobering. They understood that a people lacking a strong moral compass would be incapable of being governed by any kind of political system except, maybe, by tyranny. They knew that the remarkable system of government they had designed could not ultimately save people from their own corruption. Federalist Paper 55, written by James Madison, states, in all very numerous assemblies of whatever characters composed, passion never fails to wrest the scepter from reason. While mob mentality and groupthink tempt many to abandon their ethics, we are social creatures, and this gives us the unfortunate tendency to sacrifice reasonable understanding for questionable logic when we find it necessary to fit in with the crowd. Sadly for all of us, passion all too often wrests the scepter from reason, as James Madison warned. Another of our nation's founders, John Adams, said, our Constitution was made only for a moral people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So as imperfect as our efforts may be, we need to try to correct moral lapses, or our government will fail. Dr. David C. Gore, a professor of rhetoric, wrote, passions are an integral part of our humanity, and political discourse must appeal to humans in all their complexity. Therefore, not all passionate arguments are wrong or harmful, but he includes a warning so applicable to our time. He wrote, anger is perhaps the most difficult passion to check, and easily develops a momentum of its own, resulting in contention and violence. Anger that leads to contention and violence is ever at the ready in any collective undertaking. Someone in the body politics may not agree with the decisions made by established channels. Their disagreement can quickly flare into anger, and anger attracts followers, lots of them. Anger leading to contention and violence must be guarded against with every wise intervention we can implement. We often hear the term inflammatory rhetoric applied to this kind of anger. I think it is an apt description. Inflammatory rhetoric is like an unwatched campfire in a bone-dry forest. Without vigilance, that small fire can spread to become a catastrophic inferno, almost impossible to put out. I'd rather not point to some examples of unwatched campfires, but to make the point today, I will highlight a few. Reverend Eric S.C. Manning, who served the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 people were killed and 1 was wounded on June 17, 2015, by an angry shooter triggered by inflammatory rhetoric said, quote, "The tongue has the power of life and death. Sometimes we don't think that other people are paying attention, but they are indeed paying attention." End of quote. Angry words take on a life of their own. Reverend Manning made this statement in response to the October 27th, 2018 massacre at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, where another morally broken shooter triggered by inflammatory rhetoric killed 9 people and wounded 7 more. Here in Minnesota, we are wounded by the recent political assassinations of Melissa Hortman, a former Democratic Speaker of the State House of Representatives, and her husband Mark, on June 14, 2025, by another morally broken man who appears to have been triggered by inflammatory rhetoric. Another lawmaker, John Hoffman, and his wife were also shot in the attack. The evidence of the harm inflammatory rhetoric can do is abundant in our history. Thousands of examples could be used. I'll cite just one. When we review the rhetoric that contributed to the Wounded Knee massacre of the Lakota Sioux people in 1890, we find this summary of media reports that precipitated the tragedy. Quote, "Publication of such bilge, irresponsible even by the standards of the 1890s, had its deadly effect. The government was forced to act, even if there was no clear target against which to act. The die was cast, a tragic confrontation had become inevitable." End of quote. On December 29, 1890, the U.S. Army massacred between 150 and 300 nearly defenseless Lakota Sioux near Wounded Knee, South Dakota, the last major armed conflict in the war against Native people in the U.S. Using inflammatory rhetoric as a premeditated evil catalyst is as old as humanity. Dr. Gore reminds us, quote, "Rather than as an expression of our truthful view of the world, some come to employ words exclusively as a means for getting what they want. This approach to discourse tends to uncouple words from character, separating rhetoric from ethics in the process." End of quote. When rhetorical skills are divorced from ethics, catastrophic social wildfires are at our doorsteps. Even this brief review of how passion wrests the scepter from reason was distressing to compile. I found myself thinking, can't we do better than this? I think we can, but doing so will take intentional effort. It behooves all of us to ask, honestly, if we are involved in any way in carrying the sparks of inflammatory rhetoric into the forest. If so, we need to change our habits, and we ought to work to put out to the best of our ability the sparks carried into the forest by others. To achieve this, we may need to turn to the wisdom of the ages. Long ago, wise King Solomon counseled as recorded in Proverbs 15, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. A wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife." These words, to me, sound like putting out the sparks of inflammatory rhetoric. It also offers us a profound warning found in Proverbs chapter 22. "Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul." This counsel, if followed, would make such a positive difference in the trajectory of our nation. We remember, number 1, be ready to give soft or calm answers to those who use contention to stir up support for selfish causes. Number 2, be slow to anger even when the temptation to retaliate is great. Number 3, avoid friendships with angry people. Number 4, avoid following the furious. James Madison, John Adams, and other founders of our nation would agree with this counsel. In fact, George Washington himself gave us related counsel. When he was only 14 years old, he wrote his 110 Rules of Civility. Here are 6 of those rules that I think would be especially valuable to remember during this age of hostility and contention. Rule number 1. Every action done in company ought to be done with some sign of respect to those that are present. Rule 22. Show not yourself glad at the misfortune of another, though he were your enemy. Rule 49. Use no reproachful language against anyone, neither curse nor revile. Rule 58. Let your conversation be without malice or envy, for 'tis a sign of a tractable and commendable nature. And in all causes of passion admit reason to govern. Rule 65. Speak not injurious words, neither in jest nor earnest. Scoff at none, though they give occasion. And Rule 106. Contend not, lest you should trouble the company. Can you imagine how this nation would improve if we took these words to heart? Can you imagine what would happen if we expected, even demanded, our political and other leaders to set the example of how to live in a truly civil society instead of excusing them with weak logic, like, he just speaks his mind, or that's just the way he is? It's easy for us to condemn corruption in public office, but maybe it's not so easy to face the need we all have to take responsibility for our own rhetoric and to learn how to stamp out the sparks caused by the inflammatory rhetoric of others before they become nearly unstoppable infernos. The founders of our nation hoped we would rise to this standard. Until next time, I want to wish you all the best from the wilderness.